Johnny Carson took a letter from his desk, read the first line, and his voice stopped. The letter from Vietnam told a story no one had heard in 30 years. It was March 1975. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Studio 6B at NBC in Burbank. Another Tuesday night. Another monologue. Another 300 people in the audience expecting laughs and celebrity guests, and Johnny's effortless charm that made America feel safe before they went to sleep. The war in Vietnam was ending. Saigon would fall in less than 2 months. The news was full of helicopters and evacuations and a nation trying to forget a conflict that had torn it apart for a decade. Johnny's monologue that night had been light. Jokes about politicians, about the weather, about everyday life. The audience laughed in all the right places. Ed McMahon chuckled beside the desk. Doc Severinson's orchestra played the familiar bumpers. Everything was normal. Until Johnny reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. The laughter died. The audience sensed a shift immediately. Something in Johnny's body language, the way he held the envelope like it weighed more than paper should weigh. "Folks," Johnny said, his usual playful tone completely gone. "Before we bring out our first guest tonight, there's something I need to share with you. A letter came to the studio last week, and I've been trying to decide whether to read it on air." He held up the envelope. It was worn, the edges softened by time and handling. The address was handwritten in careful block letters. "This letter is from a woman named Margaret Sullivan. She lives in Cleveland, Ohio. She's 72 years old. And she's been carrying something for 30 years that she wanted someone to finally hear." Johnny opened the envelope carefully, almost reverently. He pulled out several pages of handwritten paper. Aged, slightly yellowed, the creases showing it had been folded and unfolded many times over the years. Margaret's son was named David. He was 19 years old when he was drafted in 1968. He served in Vietnam as an infantryman. And on November 14, 1968, he was killed in action near the Mekong Delta. The studio went silent. 300 people who had come for entertainment, suddenly understanding they were about to witness something else entirely. Johnny looked down at the pages. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. Margaret found this letter among David's belongings when the army sent them home. It's dated November 13, 1968. One day before he died. He never had a chance to mail it. In the middle of the studio, Johnny Carson began reading a soldier's final note, and in the second paragraph he stopped, lifted his head, and the orchestra went silent because that letter was a death message. Johnny's voice was measured, controlled, as he began to read. "Dear Mom, I'm writing this at 0300 hours, which you'd call 3 in the morning. Can't sleep. We're supposed to move out at dawn for a patrol near the Delta. Probably nothing. Probably just another long walk in the heat. But just in case, I wanted to write some things down." Johnny paused, clearing his throat. Ed McMahon had gone completely still beside him, his usual jovial expression replaced by something solemn. "I know I haven't been good about writing. I'm sorry about that. It's not that I don't think about you every day. I do. I think about home all the time. I think about your pot roast on Sundays. I think about Dad mowing the lawn and getting mad at the mower when it won't start. I think about Susie practicing piano and complaining about it. Normal things. Safe things." Johnny's voice had developed a slight tremor. He continued reading. "The guys in my unit are good men. Jackson from Texas tells the worst jokes you've ever heard, but he makes us laugh anyway. Rodriguez from California talks about his girlfriend so much we all know her life story. Thompson is the quiet one, but when things get bad, he's the one you want next to you. We take care of each other. We're brothers in a way I can't really explain." Johnny stopped. He looked up from the letter, his eyes scanning the silent studio, then down again. His next words came slower. "But Mom, I need to tell you something, and I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to say it if I make it home. This war doesn't make sense to me anymore. I don't know why we're here. I don't know what we're fighting for. The people in the villages we patrol look at us like we're the enemy, and maybe we are. I don't know anymore. The audience was frozen. Some had their hands over their mouths. Others were crying silently. This wasn't the kind of content that belonged on late-night television. This was raw. This was real. Johnny's voice grew quieter, more deliberate. I'm scared, Mom. I know I'm not supposed to say that. I know I'm supposed to be brave. But I'm 19 years old, and I'm scared all the time. I'm scared of dying. I'm scared of killing. I'm scared of what I'm becoming in this place. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't recognize myself anymore. Johnny stopped reading. He set the letter down on his desk, his hands flat on either side of it. He looked directly into camera 1. I'm going to pause here for a moment, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Because what comes next, you need to be ready for what comes next. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The studio remained absolutely silent. Johnny picked up the letter again. His hands were shaking slightly now, the paper trembling. David wrote this next part about his father, Johnny said to the audience. Margaret's husband, David's father, had died of a heart attack in 1965, 3 years before David was drafted. Johnny read. I talk to Dad sometimes. I know that sounds crazy, but I do. When things get really bad, I imagine what he'd say. I think he'd understand the scared part. I think he'd tell me it's okay to be afraid as long as I take care of my guys. I hope I'm making him proud. I hope I'm making you proud. Johnny's voice broke slightly on the word proud. He stopped, composed himself, continued. If something happens to me, and I know you don't want to think about that, but if something does, I need you to know that I wasn't alone. I have my brothers here. And I need you to know that I loved you every single day. Even when I didn't write. Even when I was too tired or too scared or too angry at this stupid war to put pen to paper, I loved you. The camera caught a tear rolling down Johnny Carson's face. He didn't wipe it away. He kept reading. I need you to do something for me, Mom. If I don't come home, I need you to find Jackson's mother in Texas, and Rodriguez's girlfriend in California, and Thompson's family in Michigan. I need you to tell them that their sons and their boyfriend and their brother took care of me. That when I was scared, they made me laugh. That when I was lonely, they were my family. Can you do that for me? Johnny set the letter down again. He looked at Ed McMahon, who was openly crying now, not even trying to hide it. Then Johnny looked back at the camera. Margaret Sullivan did exactly what her son asked, Johnny said quietly. After David was killed, she spent 2 years tracking down the families of the men who served with him. She found Jackson's mother in Texas. She found Rodriguez's girlfriend in California. She found Thompson's family in Michigan. He paused, letting that sink in. And she learned something. Jackson had been killed 3 weeks after David. Rodriguez had lost both legs to a landmine and spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Thompson had made it home, but he took his own life in 1972, 4 years after the war ended for him. The audience gasped, a collective sound of pain that rippled through the studio. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny stood up from behind his desk. He walked to the edge of the stage, still holding David's letter. The cameras followed him. The producers in the control room started shouting into headsets. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't how the show was structured. What was Johnny doing? But Johnny ignored all of it. He addressed the audience directly, speaking not just to the 300 people in Studio 6B, but to the millions watching at home. Margaret Sullivan sent this letter to our show because she wanted people to know her son's story. She wanted people to know that David wasn't a hero. He was just a kid. A scared kid who loved his mother and missed his home and didn't understand why he was in a jungle on the other side of the world. Johnny's voice was steady now, powered by something deeper than performance. She wanted people to know that thousands of young men just like David went to Vietnam. Some came home. Some didn't. Some came home but left parts of themselves there. And all of them, every single one, deserved better than they got. He looked down at the letter again. David wrote one more paragraph. His last words. Written at 3 in the morning on November 13th, 1968, hours before a patrol that would end his life. Johnny read. The sun's starting to come up. We move out in 20 minutes. I can hear the guys getting their gear ready. Rodriguez is singing in Spanish. Jackson's probably telling another bad joke. Thompson's checking his rifle for the 3rd time because that's what he does. And I'm going to fold up this letter and put it in my pack, and maybe I'll mail it tomorrow, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll read it someday when I'm home and think about how scared I used to be. Maybe I'll show it to my kids and tell them about Vietnam, and about being young and being far from home. Or maybe none of that will happen. But right now, in this moment, I want you to know, I love you, Mom. I love Susie. I love Dad, even though he's gone. I love the life we had, and I hope I get to have it again. And if I don't, I want you to know that the last thing I thought about before the sun came up was your face. Love, David. Johnny folded the letter carefully. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning running. 300 people sat in absolute stillness, many crying openly, all of them processing what they just heard. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Johnny looked up at the audience. Then he did something he'd never done in 15 years of hosting The Tonight Show. He stepped off the stage entirely and walked into the audience seating. The cameras scrambled to follow him. The control room went into controlled chaos. But Johnny moved deliberately, walking up the aisle between seats until he reached a specific row. An elderly woman sat there, hands clasped in her lap, tears streaming down her face. She was small, gray-haired, wearing a simple dress and a single strand of pearls. A military pin was affixed to her collar, a gold star. The symbol given to mothers who lost sons in war. Margaret Sullivan, 72 years old, who had carried her son's final letter for 30 years before finding the courage to share it. Johnny crouched down beside her seat. He handed her the letter, her son's words, carefully folded. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice catching. Thank you for trusting us with David's story. Margaret took the letter with trembling hands. He was a good boy, she whispered. He was just a good boy. I know, Johnny said. Everyone knows now. The audience rose as one. Standing ovation. But not the excited applause of entertainment, the quiet, respectful applause of people honoring grief and courage and a mother who had waited 30 years to let her son's voice be heard. Johnny helped Margaret to her feet. He hugged her. This complete stranger who had sent a letter to his show, this mother who had lost everything and somehow found the strength to keep her son's final promise by finding his brother's families. Doc Severinsen, tears on his face, lifted his trumpet and played a single, soft rendition of Taps. The mournful notes filled Studio 6B. The audience remained standing, silent except for quiet sobbing. When the final note faded, Johnny walked Margaret back to her seat. He kissed her forehead. Then he returned to his desk, composed himself, and looked into the camera. We're going to take a break, he said, his voice hoarse. And when we come back, I don't know. I honestly don't know what we're going to do. But thank you for listening to David. The show went to commercial. When it returned, Johnny didn't do interviews. He didn't tell jokes. He and Ed sat quietly and read letters from other Gold Star mothers that had arrived at the studio over the years. Doc played soft music. The audience listened in respectful silence. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After that night, The Tonight Show received over 50,000 letters from families who had lost sons in Vietnam. Johnny read many of them on air in the following weeks, giving voice to grief that America had tried to forget. Margaret Sullivan's letter, David's letter, is now preserved in the Library of Congress. Johnny donated it after Margaret passed away in 1983, with one request. Display it beside a photo of a young soldier who was just 19, who was scared, and who loved his mother. The letter sits there today. A reminder that behind every war are sons and mothers who never stop carrying them home.